$7 million. That was the price that decided the future of a superpower. A territory as large as half of Europe sold for less than the price of a luxury mansion today. A mistake for some, a stroke of vision for others. While politicians laughed and called it Seward's Folly, no one imagined that the frozen land was hiding oil, gold, and the key to controlling the Arctic. If a single check was able to change the balance of the world, what else are we underestimating right now? In 1867, the American government spent $7.2 million on a massive stretch of frozen land that nobody wanted. At the time, many newspapers mocked the deal, saying the country was paying for snow and polar bears. The official name of the agreement was the Alaska Purchase, today adjusted to modern value. This investment would be the equivalent of buying an entire metropolis while paying the price of a small neighborhood. Just to put it into perspective, the current value of that territory, considering oil, natural gas, gold, and strategic influence, exceeds trillions of dollars. It may be the best real estate deal in the history of the United States. While some people saw nothing but ice, others saw a board full of opportunities inside the future arena of Arctic geopolitics. A long-term vision changes everything. At the time, politicians called the deal Seward's Folly, implying it was absolute madness. But the real madness would be what came next: wealth nobody imagined, global military influence, and energy power. And if people had known what it would become, nobody would have laughed. In fact, Russia would not have let it slip away so easily. And that is where the story takes an unexpected turn. For 19th century Russia, Alaska was not called Alaska. It was known as Russian America, a distant colony that was expensive and difficult to defend. Keeping soldiers, ships, and supplies thousands of miles away from St. Petersburg drained resources Russia simply did not have. Every winter brought new expenses, new losses, and new doubts. After the Crimean War, the empire was financially ruined and feared that the United Kingdom would seize the territory by force. And there is a detail almost nobody mentions. If the British attacked, Russia would have no way to protect anything on that side of the world. Selling it seemed less humiliating than losing it for free. A financial decision disguised as strategy. And when the American government showed up with a proposal in real cash, the Russians breathed a sigh of relief. To them, they were getting rid of a frozen problem forever. They had no idea the controversy was not ending. It was just beginning. Because soon after, something happened that made every American forget the jokes about this territory. A rush that would change everything. When the purchase was announced, people called it insanity. But everything changed in 1896 when explorers found gold and triggered the legendary Klondike Gold Rush. Suddenly, thousands of people dropped everything, crossed miles of snow and ice, and turned makeshift camps into full cities. Where silence once ruled, now there were lines of adventurers and traders driven by ambition. Tons of gold began leaving the region and money flowed like never before. Those who had mocked Seward's Folly disappeared from the headlines. As it usually happens, gold changes people's opinions much faster than arguments ever could. It was not just wealth, it was validation. And every nugget pulled from the ground was proof that the investment had been brilliant. And the most fascinating part, that boom was not even the real treasure. The gold was only the appetizer. Something far bigger and more valuable was hidden beneath the ice. Something that would completely redefine Alaska's role for the United States and in Arctic geopolitics. In the 1960s, Alaska proved that it was not only a land rich in gold, it was a vault full of oil waiting to be opened. The discovery of Prudhoe Bay revealed one of the largest oil reserves ever found in the United States. Suddenly, the territory that had been purchased for pocket change in 1867 began generating billions of dollars in annual revenue. The icy winds now carried the scent of money. To transport that oil to the market, Americans built one of the most ambitious projects in history, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, an 800 miles pipeline crossing mountains, forests, and frozen regions. Hundreds of thousands of barrels per day started flowing south, supplying entire states and sustaining the economy. It was like turning ice into energy, literally. Alaska's oil changed the political and energy landscape of the United States. From that point on, it was no longer just about wealth, it was about power. Whoever controls energy controls global decisions. And soon, that frozen territory would gain a new role. Not only economic, but military, especially when the world plunged into the tension of the Cold War. When the world entered a period of global tension, Alaska became more than just a source of oil. Its location, only 55 miles from Russian territory across the Bering Strait, turned the region into a natural shield. Suddenly, the land purchased during the Alaska Purchase became the first alert point for the United States. If anything were launched from the Soviet side, American radar would be the first to see it. Military bases, giant radars, and monitoring systems began to appear in remote areas. Studies indicate that strategists viewed Alaska as a military springboard capable of reacting within minutes. It was not about geography, it was about survival. At the height of the Cold War, that piece of ice became the geopolitical equivalent of a locked door between superpowers. And it was not only about surveillance. Alaska served as an airbase for aircraft capable of crossing the Arctic at record speed, a strategic advantage that irritated Moscow. The territory began influencing decisions in Washington and affecting the mood of generals in the Kremlin. But the ice still held another surprise. Not every conflict would involve Russia. A friendly neighbor would soon enter the picture with its own interests in Arctic geopolitics. Even decades after laughing at Seward's Folly, the world realized that the purchase was not just about land. Alaska became a strategic piece in maritime sovereignty disputes with Canada, especially in areas where the ice shifts and naturally redraws the maps. Two allied countries sitting at the same diplomacy table, trying to prove who rules the top of the planet. Tense, yet polite, at least on the surface. When the ice began melting faster than expected, studies indicate that new sea routes became navigable during part of the year, sparking debates about borders and resource ownership. The expression "climate change Arctic" stopped being just an environmental concern and turned into a commercial and military issue. If the Arctic is a door opening, whoever controls the key gets the advantage. Washington argues that some passages are international routes, while Ottawa insists they are internal waters protected by law. The irony is that both countries use different maps to prove they are right. And while they debate imaginary lines on paper, a new power watches from a distance, waiting for the perfect opportunity to take action, and that entrance will completely change the game. As the ice shrinks, something unexpected happened. Sea routes that once required months of navigation can now be crossed in weeks. Studies suggest that the Europe to Asia route may become up to 40% faster. This turns the top of the planet into a new natural Panama Canal. Russia noticed this immediately and began militarizing its routes, bringing back strategic echoes of the Cold War, while Moscow expands ports and reinforces bases throughout the Arctic. China enters the scene, calling the region the new Polar Silk Road. Ships, investments, and diplomacy are all part of a silent influence strategy. The dispute is not only commercial. It involves oil, natural gas, and trillions of dollars in resources capable of shifting the global balance of power. Here, every move is worth an entire decade of advantage. In this frozen chessboard, the United States cannot remain still. Alaska is the entry point into this game, and its position turns the country into an essential piece of Arctic geopolitics. But what seems like a brilliant opportunity also hides a darker paradox. Because all of this comes with a cost that is already starting to reveal itself beneath the ice. As the ice disappears, the hidden wealth in Alaska becomes more accessible. New areas that were once frozen allow exploration, road construction, and economic expansion. But there is a price. Entire villages are sinking because the permafrost is melting like butter left under the sun. For families who have lived there for generations, it is not theory. It is the ground literally giving way beneath their feet. Studies indicate that the melting soil is destroying homes, schools, and hospitals, requiring relocations that cost billions of dollars. Pipelines bend, roads crack, and even the historic Trans-Alaska Pipeline needs constant reinforcement to avoid deforming. What was once seen as an engineering triumph now deals with a silent enemy: time and continuous melting. The paradox is brutal. Progress fuels the destruction that threatens that same progress. With each shorter winter, the impacts of climate change Arctic stop being charts and reports and become stories of families who must abandon their homes. And in the middle of all this, there is a group that has never been heard. People who lived there long before any flag was planted. Long before diplomats signed papers and celebrated the Alaska Purchase, the region already had owners. Peoples such as Inuit, Aleut, and Tlingit had lived there for thousands of years with their own cultures, trade networks, and social systems. When the territory changed hands, none of these people were consulted. For them, the sale was more than a deal. It was a sentence. Homes, rivers, roots, and histories became the property of another country overnight. For decades, these communities had to fight to prove they existed within a system that treated Alaska as a military and economic extension. The fact that they were ignored in the transaction reinforced the colonial idea inherited from Russian America. Native peoples were treated as presents, not as stakeholders. Only in 1971 did the government acknowledge part of the mistake by creating the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, which returned land and financial compensation to the communities. Even so, many challenges remain. In some coastal villages where the ice retreats faster, families must abandon homes built by their grandparents. It is a painful irony. Those who contributed the least to global geopolitical disputes are now paying the highest price. And as these communities try to preserve their identity, a provocative question emerges. What if Alaska were not under the control of the United States? Imagine for a moment that Canada had made the purchase instead of the United States. With its history of peace and diplomacy, Alaska might have been integrated as a natural extension of the Canadian North. From that perspective, it would become an enormous energy power, adding oil and natural gas to the national portfolio. And in negotiations with Russia, the relationship between neighbors could have been very different from the tension inherited from the Cold War. Now imagine something even bolder: Alaska being purchased by China today. In a world where every port, route, and logistics hub matters, Beijing could turn the territory into a strategic center to dominate Arctic geopolitics. The entrance of China into an area so close to Russia would raise questions about alliances and global balance. The mere rumor of such a negotiation would cause diplomatic chaos in Washington. But there is a third scenario: Alaska becoming independent. Owner of oil, of one of the most strategic routes on the planet, and of a unique cultural identity. A country with trillion-level resources and a small population would have enormous potential. Would it become the Dubai of ice? Maybe. But one thing is certain: any of these scenarios proves that the purchase made in 1867 was not luck. It was vision. The purchase of Alaska proved one simple thing: vision is worth more than money. While some people see ice, others see the future. The reflection is straightforward. How many opportunities do you ignore just because they seem too cold at the beginning? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep learning about geopolitics, history, and how small decisions can change the destiny of entire countries.